Welcome back, folks, to the WP-Tonic show. This is episode 263. We've got a great friend of the show as our guest. Unfortunately, my co-host, Kim, can't be with us. She's had some bad experiences with the dentist, and I can understand because I don't go there easily myself. So she's recovering from that very expensive and painful exercise, and she'll be rejoining us next week. But we've got a great friend of the show coming back, Lee Jackson. Would you like to introduce yourself to the audience a little bit, Lee?
Hello, everyone. And if you're watching, hello, everyone. Yeah, I am Lee Jackson. I am a friend of the show. I actually appear on it now and again when I'm allowed on. Cause a little bit of trouble. I am very sorry about that. But me and Jonathan go way back when I had lots of hair. No, it's a lie. We go back a year or so. And it's a pleasure and a privilege to be invited back on the show, especially now that we've made sure my mic's working. Because if you listen back to one of the original episodes I joined you, I think my Mac mic was on and it just sounded tinny and terrible. And I'm like, yeah, I'm a podcaster. And I'm talking into this and it ain't even on.
I know, it happens to all of us. It happens to all of us, actually, Lee. Yeah. But welcome back to the show, Lee. Like I say, you're always welcome. And you've been a great panelist as well. Always enjoy our discussions. This start off the show, Lee. It's been it's been a busy period for you would be an understatement, because you decided to totally rebrand your own podcast and also start a new community. Would you like to start off the discussion why you decided to rebrand the podcast and what's this new community about?
I'd love to. Okay, so WP Innovator sounded like a great idea at the time 2 years ago, because obviously I focus on building websites with WordPress, and WordPress is and probably always will be my passion for as long as it exists. I absolutely love the platform. So WP Innovator made sense as a name, and I wanted to help agencies with WordPress and also other areas of their life. However, over 2 years of the podcast, it's become more and more apparent that although WordPress is still very important, there is so much information and support out there that the more important problems that people want solving are more things like time management, stress management, generating leads, growing their business, etc. So if you listen to the podcast over the 2 years, and I don't suggest you go and do that now, that's quite a lot of hours, but you'll notice that WordPress seems to get less and less. It still gets mentioned. There are still some focuses. We still have guests about WordPress, etc. But a lot of the people on the show are really talking about, you know, how to manage your agency, how to upskill, how to find new sources of revenue, all stuff that agencies are really interested in, as well as sole freelancers, sole traders, etc. So it came to me probably a year ago that we were using the wrong name, and I was too scared to change it, because I was like, if I change it, I'm going to lose my SEO, I'm going to lose this, that, and the other, and people are going to be upset. So I never bothered. And then it came to the point where I wanted to launch a community. It's kind of a long story. I'll try and keep this short. I will keep this short for you. When I first started my business, I wanted to solve an area of stress for agencies. That was my why. That was my mission. And that was to be the freelancer or the agency for agencies that would just take over and build the website for them, and that I wouldn't disappear. I wouldn't go over budget. We would do it on time, and we would look after our agency clients so that they didn't have that part of the stress in their life. Through the podcast, we were recognizing that agencies have a lot more stress in their lives. And I can remember multiple times when I ran my agency, we had loads of staff, and we had some very dark times. And that really just continued to ignite my passion in helping agencies. So the podcast obviously started to pivot into more agency related topics, and it hit a point just late last year where I was thinking, I really need to launch a community where I can support agencies. Right now, I've got the podcast, which helps quite a few people, but I have to do my day job, which is building websites for design agencies. And that takes an awful lot of time, and I can only help a few people. So I can only help my 30 or so on the go clients. Beyond that, everyone else gets a bit of my free help through the podcast. Whereas if I launched a membership model where I could load content in and do things like mastermind calls with people and offer all that sort of stuff, then that's more of a one-to-many relationship where I can create a piece of content that's going to help solve a problem that's shared across many agencies, and that can all go into a community which is paid for, which will also help fund me to continue to create freaking amazing content on the podcast. So that's exactly what I decided to do. It was actually Chris Ducker that was the final kind of nail in the coffin, if that's the right words, on that idea. No, that's definitely the wrong words. But he said, in order to build influence, you need to be seen to sell, and that stayed with me ever since he said it. I've built influence with the podcast, but I'm not able to grow my influence without funding it, if that makes sense.
Don't want me asking you, what do you precisely mean by that? What do you think he meant by that?
What do I think he meant by that? Well, if I'm going to build influence, I need to have confidence in what I'm saying and what I'm doing. And if I'm just offering lots of free advice and not necessarily charging for it forever, then there's no kind of value exchange, is there? I'm giving you lots of value, but I'm not necessarily getting any value from you in return. If there's some value exchange, people are more likely to do something with what you have offered them, with that information that you've offered them. So we're seeing that the people inside of the agency Trailblazer community, because they've made an investment in themselves, they've done this value exchange, they are throwing themselves into the workshops in there, they're throwing themselves into the growth reports and all of those sorts of things, and being accountable to each other because they've invested in it, etc. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So, like I said, quite a long story, but yes. So it was November last year that we decided we were definitely going to do it, and within a month, we'd built everything out, and we launched on the 1st of Jan with a founder offer for a couple of weeks, and we have a whole load of members in there right now. We're having a freaking party, which is amazing, and we're really, really enjoying it. So doors are going to open again on the 14th of February.
Oh, they are. So am I correct that you managed to get enough content developed in a month period? Because that is, I would imagine there's an enormous amount of work involved in getting.
If you're watching on video, look what happened. Full head of hair, and then it all went. No, yes, I was able to gather a lot of content. Now, bear in mind that I think there's a book inside of all of us, right? You've probably got a book or three inside of you, and you've probably not written it yet.
No, there's no books in me.
There is definitely a book in you. I know it already. And there's most of us. Then let's discard you then first. we all want
to. Oh, sorry.
Damn it! There's a book in you. But this is not a pep talk. But most of us, all right, have this kind of idea for a book, and I have played around with this idea of a book for years, and I started writing it over a year ago. And it's all about going back to basics with your agency and kind of setting yourself off right. So I realized that I already had absolutely stacks worth of content for the agency reset roadmap. This was like our first series of modules that we put inside the Trailblazer community. So I was able to repurpose an awful lot of the book that I'd half written for the first few months of content, which was great. But also because I've run a podcast for years, and also I've got YouTube channel where I do tons of videos, etc. There's lots of value that you can add to that. So you can take some content that you've created, and then you can also accompany it with some further stuff like a workbook, a checklist, and other stuff that you can bundle in to add more value, and that can then live inside of a paid community. So you don't necessarily have to create tons and tons and tons of content before you launch. You can actually repurpose and add extra value to stuff that you've already done. And a lot of this was all done through the amazing advice from the membership guys. That's Mike Morrison, a fellow WordPress enthusiast. So if you check out the Membership Guys podcast, if you are interested in launching a membership site, they provide value upon value with regards to how to get a membership site planned, launched, and out there. So phenomenal. But it was stressful at the same time. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah. I think it's a fantastic decision, and totally the right thing for you to do, Lee. I'm really excited for you. I think, obviously, because of what your agency does, it's a natural pathway to go down, really. Also, I've come to some conclusions about podcasting that I would like to put to you and see if you think I'm correct.
Pray tell.
Or your own insight. I think with podcasting, you can only get value if you go two directions, and that's either select a very broad subject and accept the challenge that you're going to be up against some very large established players, and accept the level of investment in time and money that it's going to take to establish a podcast to a very broad audience, or you're going to have to focus your podcast at a very niche audience. I think a lot of podcasts are in the middle area, and because it's not a property owned by Google directly, that has some consequences with audience size and its value when it comes to SEO terms. What do you think about some of those statements?
Some of those statements. Well, I'm not really sure if there is a particular point. I mean, you've shared a few things about how you feel in podcasting. Is there a question buried in there?
I don't know. What do you think, Lee?
What do I think? What? All right. Well, I'm just going to say some stuff in response, and hopefully it'll be relevant.
Well, that's what I do, Lee.
Launching a podcast. Launching a podcast is actually very easy to do. Getting an audience is very hard to do. I think that's where you're going with this. It is actually very hard to build an audience. And I've actually got several other podcasts that people don't necessarily know about. And some of them get like 12 downloads a month. It's ridiculous because it's very hard to promote it if you don't already have an audience. The way I built my audience and the way you've built your audience, which is a great way, is by getting guests on. Because when you have a guest on, they are going to promote the fact they were on the show because they're very proud they were on the show. I'm very proud I'm on WP-Tonic right now. I'm going to share the crap out of this for the next few weeks. And my audience are going to listen to this show, and hopefully some of those people are going to stay on. So if you are thinking of launching a podcast, you definitely want to have guests, unless you have unlimited amounts of money and can spend on campaigns and all sorts of other things to drive traffic. One of the frustrating things about running a podcast is you don't know who most of the people are who are listening to your show. So we're getting thousands of downloads a month. I have no idea who everyone is. Thank you for listening, but I don't know who you are, which is why I added the Facebook group. We've got like 1,400 or 500 people in there now, which is phenomenal. So I do know an awful lot of the people who listen to the show, and we're able to interact with those people as well. But yeah, I would say podcasting is, I guess it's like having a TV show, isn't it? You don't really know who the people are who are listening. It's really hard to monetize. It's really hard to grow your audience as well, unless you're willing to put in the time it takes to build that up. So the first few shows of WP Innovator, I think we had, we were having trickles of listens, and it was quite demotivating for myself, seeing I'd had 50 downloads, which felt like a lot then, but it still kind of stuck around that for a while until we were getting into the thousands. Yeah, it can be. But if you can stay the course, if you can get your guests to promote you, and one thing that I've definitely done wrong, which is what we're trying to rectify at the moment, is I have not purposefully promoted regularly, say for the whole week, every single podcast that we've had. I've shared it once and that's it. Whereas now we're kind of repurposing the way we share it. We're actually making short video clips. We're doing different types of images, and we're building up these campaigns now so that every time we have a guest on, we will share the bejeebers out of that podcast all over the place. We will get that guest as much exposure as we can. We will be tagging them in with regards to Twitter. I always found that's one of the very successful ways. If you tag the person in when you're sharing it, they're going to see it and they're going to reshare it again to their audience and that. So those sorts of things are really helpful. But the other thing is, even if your podcast doesn't grow quickly, and it does take a year or two, there is another benefit that people don't realize. I have learned so much from the guests. It's like free consultancy. It's beautiful. I recorded a podcast just yesterday, and the guy was talking about something, and he was talking about making magical moments with your guests and sending them a gift when you hit specific milestones, because not guests, with your clients, and that blew my mind, because I was thinking, yeah, they always remember the bad stuff that we did, but if we can just infuse that with some magical moments where we send them a gift and all celebrate together a particular milestone, then that's going to change things. And I never knew that. I hadn't really figured that out, but a guest told me that on a podcast, and now I'm going to tell everyone as if I'd thought of it, and people will think I'm clever. So even if you don't grow your podcast massively, then just suck all the value you can out of it for yourself, because you're getting lots of free consultancy from amazing people all around the world.
So true. I think time has flown a little bit, so we're going to go for our break, folks, and we're going to come back and continue my great discussion with Lee Jackson. We'll be back in a few moments, folks.
Do your underarms smell? No, I won't. Don't worry, I won't do a fake ad.
That's so bad. But you are bad. But there we go. And you're on the whiskey. I've reduced the whiskey. We're coming back, folks. We're going to continue this great discussion. I totally agree what you said before the break about podcasting. I wasn't being negative about it at all, actually. I actually think if you go for the niche, and except you're not going to get tens of thousands of listeners, it's still enormously beneficial. And I have to discuss the promoting side of it with you a little bit, maybe after the podcast, because I've done a similarly awful job about it, and I should do a much better job.
Well, on that though, but I think we all have this weird kind of there's a word, self-sabotage. We self-sabotage ourselves all the time, don't we? We create something of immense value every single week, but there's this inbuilt thing inside of us as humans where we're like, oh, I can't be bothered to do all that sharing. Why do I have to do all that stuff? And we just don't get round to it. Lo and behold, 2 years later of a podcast, I've not been helping myself by not being purposeful about sharing the podcast, etc. So, when I see dips or when I see stagnant growth, a straight line and that, it's actually mainly my own fault because I've not put the time and effort in to really to schedule every episode out. And I owe it to my guests. They've given their time to be a guest on my show. I really owe it to get their message out. So we're really taking it seriously in 2018, which is cool.
That's great. Funny enough, like you, I've kind of not rebranded the show like yourself, but I've refocused the show for 2018 at a very similar time because I'm now more focused on learning management systems and membership websites and about guests that on the Wednesday show that might help that audience a little bit more. I thought it was better to focus down a little bit more myself rather than just a general WordPress audience. It's still quite a large audience, but that's what we're planning. And of course, with my co-host having so much knowledge in learning management systems, I think it was the right choice for us to go down.
It's and you're in a great niche there because I can think of 5 people who have this week alone either asked me or asked one of the communities that I'm in about what is the best LMS platform, etc. And then you can see all the conversations going, saying, "Well, it depends what you want to do, or how long's a piece of string," because it's a very complicated subject.
Send them
to WP-Tonic.
Yes.
But there's so much inside of that you can unpack, and there are so many people. I mean, I know it sounds niche, but one person is in public sector training public sector people, and yet they would still be able to listen to that. So that's encouraging.
I'm also fascinated with your development of your community through Facebook, because I recently started a Facebook group and I've done absolutely nothing with it. Absolutely zero.
I'm in it.
And I'm going to, but I've been very busy with another project, so maybe I shouldn't have started. But in the WordPress community, in the kind of communities that we regularly contribute to, Facebook isn't that normally that welcome. It's more Twitter that a lot of my guests and that seem to be on in some degree. But so I wouldn't say I dismiss Facebook because I'm actively involved with it. But I was surprised how successful you have been utilizing Facebook. Was that something that you kind of stumbled in by accident, saw success, and then channeled more of your time into, or was it something you knew was going to really help the podcast and yourself, the Facebook group?
I think I knew from the very beginning. People talk about Facebook being just for personal. You don't do business on Facebook. But I also knew that pretty much everyone has a Facebook account. So if you want to reach out to the owner of a particular type of business, then everyone thinks you need to go to Twitter and LinkedIn. That's not true. I guarantee that lady or man who is the CEO of a company you're going after also has a Facebook account and shares pictures of their cats and their children and their family, etc. So I very purposefully went for Facebook. I knew they had a great community system, the group system, to be able to create a great community and create conversation. So I then just hammered the podcast all the time. I'd even throw in comments about it halfway through an interview saying, don't forget to go to wpinnovator.com/group, and which would redirect them to the Facebook group. So it grew pretty rapidly, and the amount of time you spend in the group is only the same amount of time as you check your notifications on Facebook. It just depends how addicted you are. I'm basically on Facebook all day. There's a tab open most of the time unless I need to do some real focus, and then I'll have to close it down. But I am on Facebook a lot. And it has grown very, very quickly. There's a nice chart now because Facebook groups have a chart, and recently it started to go like that, you know, where the growth starts to speed up. So we went from like 1,000, we were in 1,000, and then we've shot up to nearly 500 more, so 1,500 in a much shorter space of time than the past. So as more people join, they share it with other people, and more people are coming into the group. So that's a wonderful experience.
So how do you balance in your own mind what goes on in the Facebook, in the public, to your new community, and offering unique content that will only be available to the members? Where's that balance line? Or is it's always a flow? It's always, you're always making that judgment, if you understand.
No. Well, it's quite easy. I mean, there's two things that I always want to make sure that I do. In the WP Innovator Facebook group, I always want to be there. I love the community. I want to add value in there all the time. I don't want them to necessarily be forgotten. And everyone knows that when I launched Agency Trailblazer, you know, WP Innovator Facebook group is one of my biggest sources of learning because there are some great people in there and they help me with my business. I network in there. I've got suppliers from there. I've got clients from there, etc. And so have other people. There's kind of two main differences about the paid community. The paid community is where we also share a lot of our financial goals and personal information about our businesses so that we can be accountable to each other and help each other out, and that sort of information that we wouldn't want our clients accidentally stumbling on a Facebook group, etc. So there's that. And then the way I add value with regards to the content that I create is that I've got the free podcast, so everyone can access the free podcast and the videos that I do. We have courses, workshops, short workshops, nothing too big and long, not like 20 modules, etc. But we have short courses that we create specifically for the Agency Trailblazer community, and we might do a snippet of that for free to the public to give them at least the basics. And then if people want a deep dive, that's where they go into the community. And along with those pieces of content will be extra things like downloads, like worksheets, checklists, or anything else to kind of help prompt the learning or help people take action. So that's what lives inside of the community. So it kind of enables us to create content for both streams very easily. One of the other cool things we've started doing as well is we've created kind of an on-demand service. So our Agency Trailblazers can actually listen to several shows in advance because obviously we're releasing a show every single week, but we batch those shows. So we've already got 4 episodes in the batch, which means you can go Netflix styley into Agency Trailblazer and go and binge on 4 of the upcoming episodes that aren't even live yet. So there's lots of other ways that we can just help people who are supporting Agency Trailblazer get extra value from it.
Sounds great. We're coming into the actual podcast part of the show. Hopefully Lee will agree to stay on for like 10-15 minutes for our bonus content. You can drink more whiskey then. But before we yeah, exactly. Before we wrap it up, would you like to tell the listeners how they can listen of the best of what you produce and get what the best areas are, Lee?
To get in touch is to go to agencytrailblazer.com. You can access the podcast. You can see my cheesy video that tells you about the community. And we're all about falling in love with your agency again. And I would just say, don't even bother trying to join the group because it doesn't open until February the 14th, which is Valentine's Day, which is the best time for you to fall in love with your agency. But go and enjoy the free podcast. There are some amazing guests on there that will really help. And go and join the free community that we have. And if that's all you ever do for the rest of of your life, wonderful. Come and be a part of the community. It's wpinnovator.com/group. I'm in there all the time. I like to make new friends, so feel free to add me on Facebook. Unless you have like a freaky picture of you with a, I don't know, with a knife or something, I might not accept the friend request. But otherwise, add me as a friend, and why not? Let's all get to know each other and network and be cool.
Yes,
stay in school, kids.
And I would highly endorse that at Folks Leads, giving myself some personal advice. And just, I'm sure any agency who is not totally happy with the direction they are going would get great value in joining these program. And I personally would heavily endorse that you should consider it and join his community, because
I'll drink to that.
Yeah, this is great. Folks, if you need to get hold of me, it's really easy. Go to the WP-Tonic website. There's a load of content on there. There's my co-host is going to be writing regularly on the WP website about learning management systems. So we've also got a host of new articles that are going to be published during this year about helping you with specific problems with learning management systems. And we will delve in with WordPress, learning management systems, membership in the coming podcasts, because that's what interests me. So that's what I'm going to be talking about. So we're going to see you next week when we're going to have a guest that's doing something amazing with WordPress. We'll see you next week, folks. Bye. There we go.
Who's the guest that's going to do something amazing? That's amazing. Tell me.
You do something pretty amazing. I think you put in a lot of hard work in it, and I'm totally sure it's going to pay off. It was totally the right decision to go down, Lee.
Well, thank you. And we've grown a great community already. So just with the soft launch, which was just to our community. So we're doing the big wide launch from 14th of February, where the whole world kind of gets access. So I'm excited to see where it's going to go.
I
would love to.
I'm totally sure every day. Unless something out of your control happens, which we can never discount. Apart from that, I'm sure it's going to be a great success. There you go. So I'd like to discuss some of the mechanics of building it. So obviously you built it in WordPress. Did you use a specific membership plugin, or what's some of the stuff?
I did. I used Paid Memberships Pro.
That's what I've used quite regularly. It's
good. So if it's good enough for Chris Ducker, it's good enough for me. So I had a look at how Upreneur was created, and I also did the membership. So it's the membership guys. They've got the membership site academy, or the member site academy, sorry, which you can check out if you're looking at launching a member site. And inside of that was one of the tools they recommended. And it appealed to me because it's very developer friendly, rather than it being like one system that does what it says on the tin and you just follow its rules. The cool thing about Paid Membership Pro is that you do get lots of recipes from them to make it do stuff that it doesn't necessarily do out of the box. And there's a whole ton of hooks as well, so you can kind of create your own things as well. For example, we created a function that just did a catch-all on multiple post types, so that we could just make sure that everything was protected without having to tick boxes and all sorts of stuff like that. So it's quite developer friendly. But then I would also say that if you don't have access to a good developer, or you're not a developer, I would not recommend it at all, because it can actually be quite complicated. It can be hard to configure, etc., if you don't have that sort of backing. So, and I'm pretty sure they put themselves out there as kind of developer focused as well.
My tense on it is a little bit different. I think if you're looking for a really very bog standard shopping cart, I think you can go with them with membership functionality. I totally agree with you. Its strengths, and then I was going to say weakness, but it isn't a weakness because they're quite clear about it. But if you have got a developer, everything you've said, I totally agree. The other one that's really very popular is MemberPress, isn't it? Which is a totally different animal. Completely different animal.
And probably more recommended if you don't have a developer. as well.
Yes, yes.
Because it's actually harder, I think, in hindsight, to configure or mess around with MemberPress, but it's also an extremely powerful platform.
They're the two, and obviously there's the beauty of WordPress is when it comes to membership plugins, you got a breadth of choice, haven't you? You know that's you've got a lot of high quality plugins to look at, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think we've touched on this podcast before, but it also, just if you're going to launch a membership site, just remember, like, WordPress in its own right is kind of already a membership site, because it has the ability to log in, etc. And if you just have one line of code in your functions file, you could literally stop a certain type of page from being visible to the public and only to people logged in. And then you could use a Gravity Forms and take payment that way. So there's all sorts of things you can do if you just need basic burger. But if you're going to go beyond like we're doing, then definitely recommend looking at things like MemberPress or Paid Membership Pro. Now, there's something else I haven't told you. Can I tell you?
You can tell me whatever you want, Lee.
Well, I've been meaning to tell you for a long time, but no, it's not that. I also have IP Board, which is in InVision. They've created the InVision community. It's basically a forum. Do you remember PHP BB, the old community forums?
Oh, yes.
PHP software back in the day. Yeah, forums ruled the internet about 15 years ago. I know because I was in forums all the time. But InVision is it existed back then and still exists now. And they've got an online hosted version, but they also have a version that you can pay like $100 or $200 depending on what you need. And you can download the PHP and install it on your server. And there is a great add-on called WordPress SSO, single sign-on, which allows you to sync that application with WordPress, so that people who have paid for membership, who therefore have an account in your WordPress, can then also access the InVision board. And inside of InVision board, that's where we've got all of our community conversations with. And you can paste GIFs in there and they'll animate. You can tag people into conversations. And they also have this wall where you can see what's going on. And you can also see unread content, and everything's all organized. So it's almost like a Facebook group, but on steroids. It's phenomenal what you can do with it. So so that's what's added, I think, the most value to our community. And that's actually the most visited section. So in the last 1 month, we've been live for 31 days now. That has been the single most accessed area where people are going in and having conversations, etc., and really helping each other out and supporting each other on the actual modules that are in the WordPress part.
So did you look at any other solutions when it comes to the forum, or had you utilized that solution before and been impressed with it?
No, never utilized it before. The beauty of it was that Upreneur and the Member Site Academy were both already using it, and I was already blown away. I was like, wow, this is amazing. And I thought it must have been WordPress somehow. And I was like, how is this WordPress? This is phenomenal. I've used BB Press loads of times, utterly hated it. It's like not very feature full. Often it doesn't seem to get updated for a while. There's plugins that add features to it, but then they haven't been updated for 2 years, and it's horrible trying to use lots of free stuff when there is no when there's no real care, love, and attention on them, and there's no one's responsible for updating them. So InVision board, I'm paying money. I know it's a business. If they go bust, I've still got the code, so we can still continue to function. So that's why I went with that eventually. I did try BB Press, but just all the same old problems came up again. It was very limited. It didn't do everything that I'd seen other forums do, and any plugin that I thought might add value, hadn't been updated for a year or had bad reviews, and it just makes you worry, doesn't it? Yeah.
Was there any other contenders, any others that commercial products that you looked at?
No, I think because I'd seen the power of InVision board, and I'd seen there were so many members. Like Chris Ducker at Upreneur has thousands of members, and there are conversations going on all the time, and it can handle it. So I was just like, well, it's just, let's start right. So I invested the money and just went for it.
Well, it's not ridiculous money, is it?
Not really, not in the grand scheme of things. There's a renewal, I think, every 6 months to a year of maybe $50 to $100, but it's paying for itself. It is the most active part of the community, and people absolutely love it. And one of the most common questions is, "What is this platform? Tell me more."
All right. Was you surprised at that? Was that a surprising element, or did you think the forum was going to be a key part of the community?
That's why I invested in Envision Board. I knew the forum would be one of the most important parts, because we're all relational, and a lot of us as agency owners, even if we've got 50 people working for us, it's actually a really lonely life. Our friends don't understand what we do, our family don't understand what we do, and our staff may not necessarily want to relate with us. So being able to be in a community is wonderful, and it evidenced itself in the WP Innovator community. So I wanted to be able to replicate that in the agency Trailblazer community, but also give people that kind of feeling of extra sense of security and openness, so they could actually start to share things like their financial goals and stuff like that. It's nothing too personal, but stuff that they wouldn't really want to put out on Facebook. And plus, I wanted to be able to own the community. Facebook can change their algorithm tomorrow, can't they?
Yeah, exactly.
And no one will ever see my group's notifications for if Facebook decide it, unless I pay them some money. I don't know. Whereas at least I own my community inside of Agency Trailblazer.
I think that's fantastic. Being that you're building this community, what are some of the broad biggest subjects that you've seen coming up in the forum with your community so far? Are there any trends that you're seeing that are some of the key things that have been discussed the most?
A lot of people have some very exciting goals for 2018. I don't know why, but more people in 2018 have been talking about setting targets and goals than I've ever noticed ever before. It's even happening in the free community as well, WP Innovator. So a lot of people are being purposeful this year, and there are kind of two main areas. I've noticed that people want to look at starting kind of a care plan aspect to their business, so very similar to the services you offer.
Oh, tell them to forget about that, actually.
When you connect it to what I'm about to say, then you may change your mind. Right. And a lot of people are also unpacking niching down. So if you're trying to be all things to all men, it's really hard to create a business plan, and it's really hard to charge a lot of money, because if you just run, I am a WordPress maintenance company, you are now competing with WP Curve owned by GoDaddy, which means it's a price battle, which means you probably can't win. Whereas if you are now the WordPress maintenance company for finance businesses, because you understand the perils and the security requirements of all finance businesses, and also all of the legislation of the relevant authorities, etc. And if you want me to look after your website and keep it secure and ensure that you comply with all of these, then that's going to cost you an awful lot more than WP Curve, but you are going to be looked after because we are the experts in this industry. That's the difference. And that's where you suddenly become a very big fish in a much smaller pond. And they seem to be the two biggest conversations that are happening inside of our community. Can we go into care plans? It's not necessarily care plans. It's more about reoccurring revenue, and care plans obviously being a very big one of them. And also the power of niching down. We had a podcast episode a couple of weeks ago with Jerry King, and he's run an agency for 10, 15 years. And the minute he niched down into independent funeral directors, his marketing plan wrote itself, because he knew exactly where he needed to go to get himself in front of funeral directors. He's also been able to, sell those sites, be more expensive than maybe he could have been in the past, because he's now a bigger fish in a much smaller pond. Yeah, thank you. Preach over. My dad was a minister, just so you know, guys. That's why I talk a lot. I flap my hands around.
Yeah, right. So that's interesting. What about, has there been a lot of conversation about, what's been going on in WordPress itself and the direction that WordPress itself is seemed to be taking? Has that been a subject that's come up at all quite regularly in the forum?
Shockingly, no.
No. Happily.
That's a short answer.
Happily as well, I imagine.
True, but I think no matter what direction it's going to take,
there's not much that's going to change that, is there?
We're all going to roll with it. We're all going to upskill and learn, and find new opportunities. And I think that's the importance of being an entrepreneur and an agency owner as well, isn't it? Is being able to pivot, is being able to stay ahead of the curve, and accept change and do something about it, create opportunities from that change. So if Gutenberg, for example, which I presume you're alluding to, becomes king, then there is a chance to upskill. There is a chance also to add more value into your clients' lives and thus generate more money. So I don't think it's going to be the end of the world. If it is the end of the world, watch The Walking Dead, and then you'll know how to survive.
Just to wrap up things, I'm also presuming, because of you building up your brand in the WordPress community and your love with WordPress, I'm presuming that the majority of people that have entered your new community or WordPress, well, I'm just presuming that. Is that true, or are they using various technologies, CRMs, to?
We have a obviously heavy bias of WordPress users because a lot of people have come from the WP Innovator community. However, I would say about 15 to 20% of members actually use other products. So we actually now do have Drupal and Joomla people in there. And so far, the subject isn't necessarily about the technology. Our focus is on falling in love with your agency again, which means how can we be better at business? How can we niche down? How can we find our why? How can we, help our clients? Blah 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 blah. So there, the focus is rather than the technology, which is good because I don't want people getting into a bitch fight about what the best platform. And I would actually say that WordPress is not always the right solution. And sometimes if someone's got a small budget, they need to go to Squarespace.
Yeah, I
send them to Squarespace.
Well, the plan, the reason why a lot of this has happened is that the plan is in 6 months' time you'll be able to say go to WordPress.com.
Yeah,
which you really couldn't say at the present moment with any honesty, could you? Because
no.
as a hosted solution for that type of client, WordPress.com is not the best solution, is it?
No, but if it does become the best or the better solution, that can only be good for us in the long run because everybody is going to outgrow at some point their Squarespace or their WordPress.com or their Wix or their Shopify cart or whatever. There's all these online services. There is going to be a point when people get to the stage where they need solutions that are highly customizable, enterprise level. And thankfully, WordPress, despite some of the bad press it gets, is one of the most powerful solutions out there, I believe. And in my business, we've helped clients produce phenomenally large, complicated websites that do amazing things with WordPress. So, I would, like you've got the dance offs. I would love to have a WordPress off against in fact, we did that. I was on Happy Porch radio a few months ago, and we had like a proper slap down argument with the guys from Umbraco, and we were arguing about why WordPress is better than Umbraco. So I am kind of into those arguments sometimes. But people keep slapping WordPress down, and it's freaking brilliant. It can do things that people could only dream of. I'm preaching about WordPress now, aren't I? And calm. But yeah. So I think in the long run it'll be good for WordPress.
My final question really is, apart from joining your community, is there any kind of tip, insight that you can give to an agency owner at the present moment that will enable them to help move on their agency in 2018?
Yes. Can I have 2 minutes to answer it?
Of course you can.
Good. All right. Sorry, guys. This is a long show. All right. The first thing you need to ask yourself is, why are you running your agency? That's a very important question, because if you don't really know why you're running your agency, then you're probably running an agency that's grown because of the events that have happened to you. So a client might have asked you once to build an app, and now you build apps and you don't really like building it, etc. And you've got all these clients from all sorts of different sectors, and that's not necessarily cool either, because again, you don't know how to market your business and you're a bit stuck. So the first thing is try and discover what your why is, what your mission is. My mission was to take the stress out of agency life, and then that has therefore grown into what I now have. So think of the stories you've had in your past. What has affected you? What do you want to be your mission in life? Your dream, your legacy. So that's your why. Then unpack what your strengths are as an agency. So what projects have you worked on that you've been super freaking amazing at? You love doing it. The clients love the work that you did at it. And if you could just do that one thing or those two things every single day for the rest of your life, you would be very happy. So have a look at those, and then from all of that, have a look at what problems that you currently solve. You're solving problems for tons of different types of people, but those particular things you love doing, what problems do they actually solve for people? Because that's going to form your mission and the problems you solve are going to form a huge part of your overall message to all of these potential clients out there. And then you kind of finally wrap that up with who do you serve? So with these problems that you solve, who is it that the people that you are serving? What's your industry? What's your niche? There's kind of two different types of niches. There's a problem niche, like Basecamp solve a problem for project managers in all sorts of different industries, and then you've also got like an industry niche where you could be the care pack, the WordPress care plan for finance directors or something like that. So there's those sorts of niche, which is an industry niche. So it's really, why are you running an agency? What are your strengths? What problems do you solve, and who do you solve them for? Once you've got all of that ingrained in your brain, that's going to start to affect all of your conversations in networking, your messaging on your website, your branding, everything. You are going to be all about that thing. That's going to essentially write your marketing plan for you as well. And it's also going to put you front of center in everyone's mind when people are looking for people to either solve that particular problem or find agencies that are in that niche.
Oh, that's great.
That would be my advice.
That was great. You want to read? That was a lot of information here, folks. So I'll rewind the video.
Did I do it in 2 minutes?
You did.
Yes.
Very impressive.
Right, we're good.
Well, Lee, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure interviewing again. Lee regularly comes on the Friday roundtable show. He's one of our very impressive panel of people that join me regularly on a Friday, and I'm always impressed with the standard of conversation from the panel. Last week's panel show was I wasn't part of it, so that's probably, it was one of the most high standard conversations I've heard for a long while from the panel without me contributing or not. But so I suggest you go and listen to the Friday shows. But Lee, thank you so much for being with us. It's been, we must come back in the next 6 months and talk some more about what you've learned from your own community. And folks, we'll see you next Wednesday. Bye.
Cheers.
Record to the cloud. Right, where that's...
Record to the cloud.
Record to the cloud.
This is Lee here live with Jonathan Denwood.
Tone it down. I don't want to start laughing when I'm trying to
Reno, Nevada. Gung gung.
No, I'm not going to respond to that.
No,
right,
okay, fair enough.
Right.
Should I share the fact that we are live? I should probably.
Yes.
I should probably share that, shouldn't I?
Get your hordes of fans on
I'm going to share it in the community.
Page.
WP Innovators. WP Innovators. Because we still have the WP Innovators. Hey, folks, we are live. I'm being pummeled. How do you spell pummeled?
Don't ask me.
Why do I there you go, I found a spelling. Thank you, Google. Pummeled with questions by this young man. There you go.
Oh, you keep saying that.
Yeah, of course. Well, basically, I say it to everyone now. It's my new thing. Just calling everyone young man until someone punches me in the face because they think I'm being facetious. All right.
Yeah.
That's shared with the innovators, and now I'm sharing it with my friends because I've got a few of those as well.
You sure?
A few.
You never know until you need them.
Well, I got some stories about that, but I'm not going to tell you on Facebook Live. Yeah, cool. All right, I've shared it on the socials.
Right, so we're ready. So, what number? Right. 3, 2, 1.